I've been dumping massive amounts of information on you here, and I think it's high time that we take a look at a real-world example of the image size dialog box in action on a real image that I took with my digital camera, and I want to give you some practical examples of resizing your images with resampling and resizing your images without resampling. In this exercise, we'll take a look at resizing images without resampling. So I canceled out of the image size dialog box, I closed out of my cartoon robot, and what I want to do now is I want to go and open up a new image with you here. So go ahead and double click on your gray background or choose File Open. And inside your Project Files folder, look for a file called resizing.jpg. Go ahead and pop that file open. Looks like this. Might want to zoom in a little bit on them. It's up to you. Okay, now a little bit of info for you here before we really go off the deep end. I took this image, I took this photo on a family road trip. It's kind of a neat curve in the road. And the camera that I took the photo on is a 5 megapixel camera. What I'm going to do now, and I mentioned this quite a while ago to you, is whenever I get an image into Photoshop, whenever someone sends me an image, I want to know what I'm dealing with. So I want to get into that image size dialog box pretty quick. Now, do you remember your keyboard shortcut for getting into the image size dialog box? Remember on the Windows side it was Control-Alt-I, or myself here on the Mac, it's Command-Option-I, right? So head into the image size dialog box, and just for the time being, make sure that resample image is turned off. And let's have a look at what we're actually dealing with here. I want to talk about the pixel dimensions just for a second. So this image is 2,560 pixels in width by 1,920 pixels in height. Now, if I take those two values and I multiply them together, go grab a calculator and multiply these two values together, what you'll get is 4.9 million pixels, or 5 megapixels. It was shot on a 5 megapixel camera, right? So if you've ever wondered how megapixels work, mega meaning millions, that's what it means. So in other words, if you have a 4 megapixel camera, it means it's going to capture 4 million pixels. My 5 megapixel camera is capturing 5 million pixels. And obviously, the higher the megapixel value, the more pixels you're capturing, which means the higher the quality of the image, right? Okay. Now, that out of the way, let's take a quick look at some of the other values that we have here. The width of my image is a whopping 35.5 inches by 26.5 inches. Perfect for the billboard that I'm going to be creating with this image. Way too big for anything that I would ever need. But the resolution is just 72 pixels per inch, or 72 ppi. Now, you might recall that I said that 72 is the value, the resolution that we'd want to use for anything on screen, right? Well, what if I want to use this image in my InDesign layout? Well, let's talk about that in just a minute. Before we get to that, though, I want to say this. If I were to print this file right now, all 35.5 inches by 26.5 inches, 72 pixels out of our 2,560 pixel width, and 72 pixels out of our 1,920 pixel height would be printed for every 1 inch of paper. Does that make sense? So for every 1 inch of paper, I'm going to get 72 pixels. Hence, 72 pixels per inch, PPI, right? Okay, now what I want to do is I want to start messing with this image a little bit. I'm going to take my resolution. Now, don't forget, resampling is off, right? So this is resizing without resampling. I'm going to change my resolution to just 10 pixels per inch and have a look at what that does to my image. Again, don't forget, the pixel values remain fixed. They remain unchanged. But check out the document size. It's now 256 inches by 192 inches. What does that mean? Well, what this means is that 10 pixels out of our 2,560 pixel width and 10 pixels out of our 1,920 pixel height is printed for every inch of paper. So now we only have 10 pixels per inch printing per every inch of paper. Does that make sense? I could make this image massive. I could make it 256 inches wide, but only 10 pixels per inch are actually going to get printed, right? Okay, let's change it up again. I'm now going to change the resolution to 300 pixels per inch. Again, the pixel dimensions at the top are fixed. The document size is now 8.5 by 6.5. So, of course, this means now that for every inch of paper, I'm going to have 300 pixels, right? So what you need to remember, if this is all kind of going right over your head and it's not really making a whole lot of sense, what you need to remember is that an inch is a fixed unit of measurement, right? An inch is never going to change. It's always a fixed unit, right? But to fit 10 pixels into an inch, or to fit 300 pixels into an inch, so in other words, the size of the pixels is going to change depending on the resolution. If I have too few pixels within an inch, that means I'm going to get a pixelated image and a low quality image, right? All right, so that's resizing without resampling, and I hope it makes sense. And everything that I said earlier, you might want to review that. So again, we're not impacting the quality of our image. We're not degrading our image in any way. We're not changing the pixel count inside our image either. And if you can, you want to try and resize your images without resampling. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's resize images with resampling.